Meantime, to the big refugee European story, Europe's police agency has given a stark warning that more deadly attacks by Islamic State across the continent are likely.
So-called Islamic State has a willingness and a capability to carry out further attacks in Europe. All of the national authorities across Europe are working to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, the Europol chief's words there following a recently published report by the agency that suggests there is every reason to expect more attacks. It highlights Islamic State's greater ability to operate at a global level. It also stresses a lack of credible evidence to predict where and when the terrorist group will strike next as well. Now, on Sunday, ISIL released a video celebrating November's Paris attacks and indicating potential future targets too. Those jihadists threaten more acts of terror, showing images of London and also of the British Prime Minister David Cameron with that the gun sight over his face. Other politicians' faces were shown as well. Here's what people in the UK capital told us they thought about these threats then.
It does worry me. I try not to use the tube, I try not to use the bus, I try to stay off the main roads, but I have to go to work every day.
I think you just have to be cautious and no, I mean it doesn't stop me from doing things. Definitely doesn't stop me from doing things, but you just have to kind of be aware and alert.
They threaten everyone. It's like Nostradamus, you predict everything and then some of it comes true. It doesn't change what I do, I keep doing my normal, everyday everything.
There have been a number of warnings and road closures since the first Paris attack, and it's been quite scary, but yeah, I'm always a bit worried what's going to happen.
France was also mentioned as a target in that Islamic State video as well. President Hollande said Monday that he would prolong the state of emergency in the country and reiterated that France would not give any ground to terrorists. Nada Hashmi is an associate professor of Middle East studies and believes there is every reason to take ISIL's claims seriously.
Approximately 4,000 Europeans have gone to Syria and Iraq to fight for Islamic State or ISIS. Hundreds of them have returned. They can still engage in the same type of attacks that we've seen in Paris, in San Bernardino, California. Those are the types of attacks that are very difficult to detect. It's very difficult to find out who's undergone a process of self-radicalization, and unfortunately there's no way of 100% guaranteeing the prevention of these types of attacks. So I think we are in for a very difficult period lying before us with respect to these types of terrorist activities.
Apologies, just now jumped the gun a bit, saying about to talk about refugees. And in fact, we were talking about ISIL, but now we're going to talk about the big refugee problem. In Sweden, a woman working at a centre for young refugees has been stabbed to death, allegedly by one of the teenagers staying there. Alexandra Mechner was a 22-year-old worker. She was a social worker temporarily helping out at that refugee centre. Alexandra was of Lebanese Christian origin. Her parents came to Sweden from Lebanon about 30 years ago, apparently. Artie talked on the phone to her best friend, who asked us to hide her voice.
Alexandra was like a sister to me. My parents viewed her like their second daughter. She was a very good doctor and a very good person. She gave a lot to people, and she didn't expect to get anything in return. She was independent and strong. She helped others a lot. Her mother knows it's not safe in Sweden at the moment, like everywhere else. But she doesn't feel any anger. She is grieving for her daughter.
RT's Harry Fear has more on the deadly attack.
Swedish police saying that a young refugee was responsible for this horrific incident. And it's a small shelter, we understand, set up at the end of last year specifically for unaccompanied minors, those between the ages of 14 and 17 years old. And now this young asylum seeker is in custody. We don't know yet his name or even age or background, but authorities there in Sweden trying to understand if this was a manslaughter case or a motivated murder. They're saying today that that's difficult, though, because there is a language barrier with the kid. He doesn't speak Swedish. And police also saying more widely that they're being stretched in general too. A spokesperson saying that they're having to respond to many disturbances in refugee reception centres, taking up sometimes significant resources in a way that they just weren't seeing 6 months ago in the country. And nationally today, announcement also that more than 4,000 additional staff are being called upon to help police forces to deal with this pull on resources. That's how they're categorising and characterising it, since, in their words, so many more refugees have arrived from abroad.
Meanwhile, a police report leaked to the media suggests that Stockholm's central train station is being overrun by migrant gangs. One officer claims that underage migrants, primarily from Morocco, are involved in crime and assaults against girls. Sweden was outraged after a recent attack on a woman with children at a metro station. Take a look at these CCTV pictures. And that's put Sweden in shock. That instant caught on security camera the woman confronting the man there after he allegedly tried to pickpocket an elderly woman. The would-be robber then turned on her, striking her in the face before running back to spit at her. The attacker has since been branded Sweden's most hated man. The suspect's been arrested and faces deportation to Denmark over it. That's the country from which he crossed initially into Sweden. Recent attacks by suspected migrants have been slammed by the public.
It's a lot of things you can do, but there's a lot of things you can't do. I mean, it's not an excuse because you don't have money or no food. You cannot just go and rob people and do that kind of stuff.
I mean, if you move somewhere, you have to be able to live by the rules of the country. So, if you're not behaving, you should not be there.
I think that they should respect the Swedish country, the Swedish people, and don't insult and commit violence and crimes on Swedish soil. That's not right.
Salman Shaheen from the World Weekly online newswire thinks incidents like these play right into the hands of the far right.
A lot of European governments, Germany, Sweden, they embraced the migrant crisis in a very positive way in the beginning. They said refugees were welcome here, but sadly, I mean, the governments have been unprepared for the sheer numbers that have been coming through, and also governments like Sweden and Germany, who are doing more, are not being supported by other governments in Europe. My own the British government, for example, is doing nowhere near as much to help. Every negative story about refugees boosts the far right in Europe. We see it in Sweden, yes, we see it in Germany too, with the rise of Pegida. And in Greece, of course, with Golden Dawn being quite well established as well.
Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is facing mounting criticism over her refugee policies. One of those critics is the deputy chief of the right-wing Alternative for Germany party, who gave a rather blunt view about Merkel's future as she saw it.
Damit meine ich, dass das Gerücht war, dass sie nach Chile oder nach Südamerika geht. Das wird auch schon diskutiert.
The statement was a reference to the fact that many Nazi war criminals fled to South America after the Second World War. Beatrix von Stoch made that shocking comment when pressed by a TV host about one of her comments online. In it, she accused Angela Merkel of ruining Germany. She also suggested the Chancellor might have to flee the country for fear when she steps down eventually. But it's not just Merkel's opponents who are on the offensive. A conservative group from Bavaria, part of the Chancellor's ruling party, has called for strict border controls to be restored, and it appears that Angela Merkel's feeling the strain over it all. Reports say that she asked coalition party members to wish her luck at a recent meeting to discuss refugee policies. And in the wake of the sexual attacks in Germany, the government has promised to toughen its stance on asylum seekers accused of crimes. However, a former German policeman I spoke to has revealed that migrant gangs don't fear criminal charges as they've got no effect on their asylum applications.
What happened is that we got on New Year's Eve like a vast amount of sexual assaults, and well, most of them were committed by an intense offenders group that we are dealing with since several years. And the thing is, as our prosecution is not really working properly, the penalty they get doesn't really influence their asylum process, you know? And so they kind of move fearlessly. Nonetheless, those kind of sexual assaults we had the first time, and especially like in that amount and in that cruelty, it is like a phenomenon that appeared the first time.
Since New Year's Eve, German police have been under fire for their dealing with the assailants and for not initially reporting the harassment. Nick Hine again says it's unfair, though, to blame police because they severely lack equipment and funds.
I was a patrol officer, and I wasn't involved into planning those things, but way more than there were there. You know, a simple example, I throw 5 tennis balls in your direction, you can only catch 2 because you only have 2 hands. And that's what happened that night. We had not enough police officers to compensate the crime rate that was happening at that night. But first of all, we need way more police stuff. We need to raise that bar, as I said. Then we need to use the laws that we already have. And especially, I would say we need to strengthen some laws and make them sharper.
Libya rejects UN-backed unity government report on what awaits the country next, then after this quick break.